Quorum. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Welcome, everybody. We're going to have an interesting discussions tonight. I hope everybody enjoyed the nice spring-like weather for these 2 days. It's going to rain for the next couple of days, I guess, but we're heading toward good weather, I hope, from now on. So with that, Rachel, will you please read the county Zoom notice?
Sure. This meeting is being held pursuant to and in compliance with Emergency Ordinance Number 20-A16, an emergency ordinance to ensure the continuity of government during the COVID-19 disaster. The committee members who are electronically present at this meeting are Marty Davis, Marty Meth, Brian McMillan, Judy Schluchel, Lee Condor, Rick Seaman, Todd Cohn, and Tom Paoletti. We have Daniel Bailey, the Planning Commission liaison, and staff present are myself, Rachel Falkenstein, Carolyn Schaefer, and David Benish. The persons responsible for receiving public comment are the Places29 Rio Community Advisory Committee, and the opportunities for the public to access and participate in the electronic meeting are posted on the Albemarle County calendar.
Thank you. Tom, for the record, Peter and Audrey are excused from the meeting, and Nicole told me she's going to be joining us in a couple of minutes, so I would count her present. The first order of business is to review and approve last month's minutes. Does anybody have any corrections? Marty?
I really missed under the new the watch list updates. I really misstated the problem. The problem should have been water coming down Woodbrook is one problem, and then the undercutting of the road separate from the water coming down is a second problem.
Okay, I think, not sure we can correct it on this. We'll correct it in the watch
The
list,
new watch list, great.
and that's the way I'll do it. Okay. Without any other comments. So do I have a motion to approve the minutes, please? Somebody?
Move to approve.
Lee, thank you. Second. Okay. All in favor? Raise hands. Okay. That is approved. The first item on our agenda is a review of the Rio Road Corridor Plan Scope. It's listed as both David Benish, first of all, thank you and welcome, and Ned, who's going to help you, but he's not here at the moment. So I think you can proceed without Ned right now.
Yeah, we've talked to Ned, and so hopefully I can represent this along with him, and he'll join us shortly, hopefully. And again, I'm David Benish. I'm a development process manager with the Community Development Department. And if any of you happen to listen in to the board or planning commission recently, this presentation is essentially the similar presentation to that we gave both of them. We want to keep consistent information to all of our bodies and agencies. So if you've were at those other meetings, I apologize. This may be a little bit redundant. But I'll go ahead and get started. As you know, the Board of Supervisors, excuse me, let me get the slide presentation up. Can you see it?
Yep.
All right, good. So as you know, the Board of Supervisors directed staff to undertake a study of the Rio Road corridor. The consultant, Line and Grade Civil Engineering, has been hired to develop this plan in conjunction with the Community Development Department staff. Line and Grade has previously assisted the county in the development of the recent Avon Street corridor study and plan, as well as other planning and development projects within the county. We have a good, strong relationship and a good working relationship with this group, good experience with them. The scope of the study is generally from the Rio 29 small area plan area to south of the John Warner Parkway. And I've got a slide that goes into a little bit more detail about the extent of the study. I know there's been some questions about that. But first, the scope as outlined in the consultant contract is to conduct an evaluation of the corridor, develop comprehensive design alternatives to serve as a guide for future development and infrastructure rehabilitation projects, and provide solutions to enhance mobility and access for all users and all common travel methods, and traffic safety and operational improvements which will best serve the future needs of the corridor. One important, unique, and new process for us is that this marks the first time we partnered with the county's Office of Equity Inclusion to utilize their new equity impact assessment process. In the OEI's initial demographic analysis of the area, it reveals a corridor that has a very diverse population regarding race, age, income, ownership status, and transportation service needs. And we want to ensure to the greatest extent possible that this plan considers the perspectives and well-being of all residents and user groups. And that is reflected in the plan's recommendations. So that's a really important step for us here. To go into a little bit more depth on the extent of the corridor study, I know there's been some questions and concern about that. The extent of the corridor is from John Warner Parkway and essentially Penn Park Road northward to the Rio small area plan area near to Route 29. And the two-lane portion of Rio Road, or what Rio Road East, or what I call the two-lane section of Rio Road from Penn Park Road to John Warner Parkway intersection, is part of the focus study process, and it always has been. It is the approach to the John Warner Parkway intersection and the traffic circle there. It's also important to note that the traffic information for Rio Road East and also for the Rio Road small area plan section is considered and evaluated as part of this study. What we're further going to do in the plan is that we are going to incorporate existing recommended improvements for the Rio Road East area, or again, that two-lane section of Rio Road from the John Warner Parkway to Melbourne Road, as well as we're going to do the same and for the Rio small area plan area, the western end of the focused study area. And the consultant will provide a basic level of assessment of these improvements and gaps in facilities in these areas. So there is some level of assessment of the full Rio Road corridor, but due to cost and timing and the relative priority that we have for looking at the section of Rio Road, we're focused in on the arterial section of the roadway, which is the 4-lane section, as sort of the highest priority area. I do have a map that we can refer back to if that's useful to it, but it does show the corridor a little bit more accurately. The consultant kind of sees the bubbles there as sort of the zone of influence that affects the corridor, and is taking into consideration to some extent all information within that bubble, but primarily focused in on that corridor that you see in green and blue. And we can refer back to this if you have further questions. The time frame for the work, the consultant work is now underway. The scope of the services assumes a project schedule of about 12 months. They began work in earnest really in December. So we hope to have a product for board action by November or December. Once completed, the corridor plan, either in full or parts of the plan, would be adopted as an amendment into the comprehensive plan in the Places 29 master plan. That process for the amendment will take place when the corridor plan is completed, reviewed and accepted by the Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors. There are really kind of, for the public, we're describing about 4 stages of work. The first stage is the discover stage, and that is looking at the corridor background and document review and assessment of the existing conditions, which is underway and nearing completion by the consultant. The next phase would be the defining or vision phase, where conceptual design alternatives and concepts will be developed and considered. Once those concepts and alternatives have been vetted, the third stage would be the development of the actual draft plan with recommendations for improvement. And the final stage would be the actual Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors approval and adoption phase. Information developed during these stages will be made available on the public hub site, which I'm going to speak to a little bit more in a minute. It'll be available there for review and comment, and meetings will also be scheduled to present and discuss the information with the public. In developing this plan, the consultant will assess the comprehensive plan, the Places 29 master plan recommendations, existing zoning characteristics, existing traffic studies, and other existing and current projected traffic data. The consultant will evaluate the corridor against VDOT access management criteria for intersections and entrances and road design and relevant safety criteria, and we'll be looking at crash data. The multimodal characteristics of the corridor for pedestrian, bike, and transit use will be assessed against similar standards and criteria. The consultant will also assess and make recommendations on the urban design, context, and character of the road corridor. As far as public engagement, this plan represents a collaborative effort between the Office of Equity and Inclusion that I previously mentioned and our Communications and Public Engagement Office, or CAPE as we refer to it, and our Community Development Department. In fact, CAPE, Community and Public Relations, is really the lead in the public engagement process in designing and implementing it. The public engagement goals are centered on our mission and our community values. Those goals are to inform participants about the project, the process, and provide background information to prepare everyone to participate fully, create space to share and understand different perspectives, knowledge, and experience, to reduce barriers to participation, to learn who we are that are participating in or involved in this area, and who we are not, and reaching and adjusting the approach to respond accordingly to that information, and to create an inviting, enjoyable experience that will get lots of folks to participate in the process. Here are outreach methods that we'll use to raise awareness about the project and encourage participation. Our email newsletter, or also known as Albemarle County News, or CAN. We'll highlight the project news on the county's website. We will do outreach strategically to news platforms. And we also have, CAPE has 5 flyer kiosks, those weatherproof boxes like real estate agents use, which will have flyers in them, and they'll be put up in strategic locations so that people that might be passing by will have an opportunity to see the information and grab one of those flyers and find out about the process. We're going to directly contact churches and property managers and others who may be able to share the information with larger groups of people. And CAPE is going to create door hanging tags, primarily probably focused on some of those communities that don't have strong homeowners associations or internal communication conduits and use that approach to make sure those groups are and communities are aware of the process. As far as project communication, we understand that clarity and consistency are very important, and we've developed an online project hub. I think you see the website here, which will house information and online participation opportunities for the project. In addition, the county's website now includes a page about the project with a link to the project hub. We'll say the project site has been up, I think, for a couple of weeks. We already have over 100 participants. There is a questionnaire on that site, so if you haven't gone to it, you might want to take a look at it. The questionnaire does allow us to geolocate where the comments are coming from as well. So it's a good source of information. It's being used already. This project will also be the debut of CAPE's new field office, and we will soon have a van that has been upfitted to go out to locations. So we'll have pop-up locations in the quarter. The van will have information that we can display and possibly have a small group meetings from that van. And those strategic locations could be commercial areas, gasoline alley, senior center, or the transit stops at the mall, other population centers that we want to make sure are aware of the project. And those are just some examples. And then finally, we will have, of course, virtual meetings, workshops, and events to review the components of the consultant's work and develop a shared understanding of the solutions with the community. So the next steps in the process will be a virtual kickoff meeting with the public. We have those scheduled for March 11th and 12th. The 11th is an evening meeting. I believe that's going to be at 6 o'clock, and then the 12th will be at midday, probably at noon. It'll be very similar to this type of presentation. It's more of informing information out. The consultant will have a brief presentation of some of the background information. And that those meetings will be recorded and posted on that Project Hub site. So if you can certainly attend and get the information from the consultant, the background information, but that information will also be available on the hub. One of two or both of those meetings will be recorded and posted on the hub. As I said, we have made presentations to the Board of Supervisors and Planning Commission, and now you. I think that's really concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have about the project or any thoughts that you have.
Okay, I'm going to ask members of CAC if you want to unmute yourself. Let's go back and ask a question. Does anybody have questions? Raise your hand so I can see you and I'll call.
You have to get the video on, Karen.
Judy?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Now you got your, I heard you first, and then
Yeah.
Rick. Okay.
Hi, and I'm unmuted. Hi, David.
Hi, Judy. How you doing?
Okay, how about you?
I'm hanging in there.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. I heard it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so a question to ask you. I've been in conversation with Cameron,
Mm-hmm.
and he has just advised me, of course, I already knew that Cotterites, who was the developer or the initial developer of the Wetzel property, has backed out, but there's a new group that is coming in, and Cameron and I guess his colleagues are having a meeting tomorrow to find out what this company plans on moving, how they're planning on moving forward. What kind of an impact will that have on the Rio Corridor study?
Well, it'll be interesting to see what their proposal is. If the presumption is the proposal is consistent with the comp plan, then that type of improvement is being already contemplated within the study. The densities that are called for in the comprehensive plan. With the tentative recommendation or the recommendation for the establishment of or funding of the traffic circle now at the John Warner Parkway, that may affect how some of the recommendations are made regarding the improvements along Rio Road. I think ideally the timing would be that this work is completed, our consultant work is completed, so that it can inform that development proposal. And so I think the idea of the timing and getting this corridor study done now was to help inform development proposals in a timely manner, to have the recommendations to provide to the consultant. If the proposal is significantly different than what the comp plan is, there's all sorts of other major issues with it, but I'm not familiar with what's being proposed on this site.
I don't know either, and neither does Cameron. He
Yeah.
said he'd be able to let me know more after tomorrow's meeting. But okay, so what about, originally Cotterides was having all kinds of road configurations and
Mhm.
crossovers and on this 2-lane highway and et cetera, et cetera. And I don't know if this new developer is planning on pursuing that part of it, or if he's pursuing just the building aspect of it. But having said that, when you talked about the 2-lane road, I mean, Rio is a 2-lane road. So what kind of an impact do you think that may have on the Rio Corridor study?
Well, again, the Rio Corridor study is going to take into consideration the comp plan recommendation, which is high density residential. So the study will be understanding, and we'll be using the prior study that was done with the prior rezoning as some information that helps them gauge what improvements would be the appropriate improvements to that area. So if the development is consistent with what's called for in the comp plan, the consultant is going to be, in looking at the recommendations for that section of roadway, be cognizant of what that ultimate development is going to be. So, obviously the consultants early on in the process, what is new or different now than when the prior development was proposed was we didn't have a proposal to fund the roundabout. The design of the roundabout does allow for a different possibly different types of improvements than what were proposed previously, because previously it was going into a signalized intersection. So I think the study, and I'm kind of trying to keep it simple, this study was intended to be done in a timely manner to help develop what sort of improvements should be incorporated into development proposals. So the hope would be that we could time the completion of this work with the submittal and review of that zoning request, so that that applicant knows what types of improvements are needed along the frontage of their site. I will say that what we have already recommended, and is sort of a general recommendation for this area, at least one aspect of it, is that from a frontage standpoint, at least from a pedestrian and bicycle facility standpoint, we are recommending, and have in the past, and would for any development in that area, to have a 10-foot shared use path on that west side of the road that would extend the John Warner Parkway Trail along that corridor. And we would, our recommendation is to continue that 10-foot asphalt path all the way down to Penn Park Road intersection. So along the frontage of their site, we would definitely be expecting that level of development. It would also have a treed lawn and street trees. So that aspect of it, we know what we want. How the traffic is accommodated might be a function of what comes out of the study process.
Okay, so another question.
Wait, Judy, we're gonna go around a little bit. Let's everybody have a chance. So Rick, why don't you go next, and we'll come back. I'm not gonna forget everybody. Rick?
Okay, well, I think I'm just curious to follow on a little bit, because early on in one of your first slides, David, you mentioned this idea of incorporating existing recommendations for the 2-lane section of Rio Road East. And I think you just mentioned perhaps some of them, but can you elaborate a little bit more on what existing recommendations were going to be included?
Sure. Let me go back to the slide. I actually have a slide that lists those, and unfortunately, I don't have a map. I didn't have time to put one together, but hang on one second. Can everyone see that? Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
No, whoops.
There.
There we go.
Okay, I can go through the list of projects that are either identified in our master plan, comp plan, or our transportation priority list. And I'll start from the top. How about that? We do have budgeted as a 5-foot sidewalk on the east side of Rio Road from the John Warner Parkway intersection to Penn Park Road. That is actually funded, and that project's out to bid. That project also includes from Penn Park Road that it shifts over to the west side, and from the Penn Park Road intersection to the frontage of the Treesdale development where there's existing sidewalk. It brings that sidewalk to that Penn Park Road intersection, and then there would be crosswalk so that you could cross over from one side to the other.
I'm going to interrupt you for a second, Dave, but I don't think that's correct exactly, because I got the plans. The sidewalk on the west side only goes up to town, and I think there's no sidewalk further than that. And so
No, this is planned and budgeted, and it's out to bid for construction.
I have the plan.
Yeah.
I have the plan, David. I don't think it's correct.
And what section is not correct?
It ends at town road. I thought you implied it went further than that. It goes a little bit past the school there. And, say again how far you think it goes on the west side?
On the west side, it goes from the intersection of the Waldorf School
Right, to
Treesdale.
I don't think it goes that far. I think I'd ask you to check that and get back to us, please.
Okay, I'm pretty sure it does. It's only 2 intervening properties. It's one single family home and then the village community. Forget the name of the.
Yeah.
Well, just if you don't think it goes very far, okay.
Okay, well, I will double check that. It's good. I should double check that for sure.
Now, also, David, I could come back to this, but my understanding was that when the first that sidewalk on the east side went out to bid, there were no responses. And so the question is it going out to bid again?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, well, they'll rebid it. Hopefully I'm mostly correct in this. The project has to be bid as a multiple bid project. So I think there are other sidewalk projects that are part of the bid. So I think they're going to break the bid up, I believe, but it is going out to bid again.
Okay.
And the hope is to have the road constructed within this construction season this coming summer.
This project, just David, is a sore point in our community, just to have that. That project should have been finished in 2019, not,
Mhm.
and we're up to 2021 already, finished in 2000.
I know. There were some right-of-way acquisition issues, as I understand, that has delayed it for quite some time. We would like it to have been constructed sooner too. The other recommended improvements are a roundabout at Penn Park Road and Rio Road. There was actually a smart scale application made, and I think it was made in 2018, but I'm not sure. It might have been 16. For that did not get funding at that time. There's also a roundabout proposed at Penn Park Lane and Rio Road. And then a proposal to construct a shared use path from Stonefield to Melbourne Road or the John Warner Parkway shared use path, which would be continuing on from the existing sidewalk on the west side that I believe stops in front of the Stonehenge frontage, and either continue that off-road or on-road. There's a portion of an east-west trail that is between the Stonewater and Treesdale development that was required as part of those developments that has been partially constructed. It does have public access easements over it, but the intent of that is to provide, again, an east-west connection sort of along the midpoint of Rio Road to the John Warner Parkway. The completion of that east-west trail would require a bridge over Meadow Creek Parkway and some additional trail that has not been funded as yet. A trail and access easement was also incorporated within the Eco Village Development Project, which is the undeveloped project on the sharp curve at Agnes Street. That project has not moved to final site plan approval, but there is hope that we will get that section built as well. And that would provide sort of an off-road trail connection from Rio Road back to Rio Road at the bottom of the curve and hill. And there is, as you know, existing sidewalk that was recently constructed across the frontage of the lofts and the Catholic school. It does not extend all the way to Penn Park Road. However, there's an intervening property there, and as at this point, I understand an unwilling property owner. But there would be a hope that that's a gap that needs to be filled as well. I think I covered those. Those are the projects. Those are the ones that we have as recommendations in our, again, transportation priority lists or in our comp plan that we would hope to try to move forward to construction.
That's great, David. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Sorry it took so long.
Oh, that's fine.
Okay,
I'll stop sharing this again.
thank you. Other people, I was able to go back to Judy. Judy, go ahead, please.
Okay, David, question. I have a question. How are you planning on getting people safely from the east side to the west side with all these sidewalks?
On Rio Road?
Yes.
Well, at the intersections, there would be crosswalks. At Penn Park Road, with the existing signal, there would be a crosswalk constructed. With the ultimate traffic circles, they also would incorporate crosswalks. You know, if you've been through the traffic circles, you know they're at the approach points, but the crossings would be really important. And ideally, it's why you want sidewalks on both sides of the road in an urban area. And so we hope to have sidewalks ultimately on both sides of Rio Road. Likewise, at the John Warner Parkway, there would be crosswalks proposed.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions? Okay, so David, I have a couple of questions.
Mm-hmm.
This CAC represents the entire area. So that includes the part of the Rio Road that you're not addressing, goes all the way down to the city line. You have two distinct roads. One is a 2-lane road and the other is 4 lanes with a central turn lane as well through most of it, sidewalks on most sides. What was the rationale for not including the entire, that part of the Rio Road that you said were not going to be emphasized?
Well, quite frankly, part of it was cost and timing. Along with that, the thought that the arterial road section, the one that is the 5-lane section, carries a significant amount of traffic, and it has 3 to 4 intersections that have been recognized as being statistically dangerous intersections are perceived by the public to be dangerous intersections. Belvedere, Greenbrier Drive, and Hillsdale Drive. Hillsdale Drive and the Old Brook Road intersection, VDOT considers one of the more dangerous intersections in the whole Culpeper district. It's, I think, one of the higher rated ones. With 29,000 vehicle trips and the combined function of carrying that amount of through travel from areas north of the county to downtown and areas east, and also accommodating residential traffic and access to businesses, conveying that level of traffic, it was deemed that focusing in on this corridor was more important. We have sidewalks that are there, but if you go and look at some of the responses on the hub site, you'll see that most people consider them dangerous and don't use them, and they're not frequently used. Our transit service is not frequently used there, and whether that's because it's an uninviting place to get to the bus stops or not could be an issue. But that's something that we also wanted to vet and understand. So I think that, along with the fact that the areas to the west, the small area plan area at the west end of this corridor and Rio Road South does have some level of planning and proposed improvements to it. It was thought that addressing this high volume area, this dangerous area, a place where we've had 2 pedestrian injuries over the past 10 years, was one that we probably needed to focus in on more. And then the consultant emphasizes that these are 2 very distinct roadways, and that both deserve attention, but it is better and a more of a natural break if you have limited resources and timing to focus in on them as 2 separate areas. So they felt like, given the limited resources and timing that we had, it was better to focus in on the higher speed corridor. So those are the factors that went into the decision. I think, as Judy mentioned, there's a desire to move efficiently through this process to make sure that we had some recommendations that could help with development proposals that were in the offing. And this was sort of the important areas to have those recommendations for. We do think that coming out of the study that we are, you will get some assessment of the corridor from Melbourne Road to Route 29, but you won't have the level of it. You'll have a lighter analysis of the Rio Road East area, but that information could be good information for a possible next phase of study work.
Are you familiar with how this got started?
Excuse me?
Are you familiar with how this got started, this corridor study discussion got started?
Well, the corridor study, I don't know when the start is. I've been here 35 years and I've heard about it, the need to consider improvements in this area for a long time, dating back to as recently as Brad Sheffield's interest in doing a study for this area. But
It came,
our
let me interrupt a little bit, because I mean, it got emphasis, let me say it that way, when the Wetzel property was proposed, the zoning amendment was proposed. And there was a lot of concern about traffic at that point in front of that property. Out of that, Ned felt and advocated, as well as the traffic people, that we needed some type of corridor study. I don't think we get a complete answer if we don't look at the part of Rio that you're essentially not giving the equivalent emphasis. In fact, your list of all the improvements as you went through them, most of them you said were not funded. I think that it needs as much emphasis there as it does on the part that you're looking at. And I think there's a little bit of a broken promise here. I mean, that's why we asked you to come, because our understanding of the scope of the project was that it was going to entail the entire Roundabout area. And now, when you briefed it initially to the board, Ned was surprised. I was surprised when I heard that. Others were surprised that it wasn't that way. So I think you haven't said much more than what you said at the meeting, as far as I can tell right now. It's not going to get any more emphasis in terms of scope, is from what I heard you say right now. Am I wrong?
Well, I think that there was a little bit more emphasis than what was thought of. The portion of Rio Road that is the frontage of Wessel down to Penn Park Road is part of what is going to be studied. It is kind of an important approach to the John Warner Parkway intersection and was always going to be vetted to a greater detail. Again, I think this is a situation where to use the resources in the most efficient way possible to get a good product on a portion of a road, we also think is very important to improve and upgrade. I mean, we have people that have a hard time crossing the road to get to the bus at the other end of this thing, and they are dependent on transit access. So the whole corridor does need to be studied. I think the hope is that we provide some level of assessment through the whole corridor, and that can be a good precursor to a next phase of work. I can't promise the next phase of work. I don't control the purse strings, but I think that was the decision process, was to try to get the most efficient, cost-effective product we can in an area that we believe, an area that carries 29,000 trips at a very high speed on an undivided roadway with residents and churches and businesses and people trying to cross that traffic, that was relative to the whole corridor, the most important part of the corridor. But I think everyone recognizes that evaluating the whole corridor is going to be very important. I think there'll be some good products coming out of this for the whole Rio Road corridor, but you know, that was our rationale in how the project got scoped and negotiated.
Is there any chance that you could go and at least survey the people in the part that you're not doing right now, open up your hub and ask them what issues they face?
Yeah, we're going to, in part of our notification process, make sure we're expanding beyond. Our thought was that we would be going down that Rio Road corridor a little bit, but we'll go the full extent. Sure that all the communities along the corridor are aware of the study. Because the study will document those recommended improvements, and there will be some basic level of assessment of gaps. And that'll allow the community to kind of vet those. And again, I think that level of work can be a good stepping point to identify what additional work is needed along that corridor as far as study work, whether it's planning work or actual design work to get some of these projects built.
So one other question I have about the company, the consultants that you used. I went back and looked at their website. And the two projects that they cited seem to have a bias in a sense. I mean, I'm just reading, both ended up being traffic circles as their solution. They have enough experience and background. I didn't see traffic as either in either of their educational backgrounds. They had 3 consultants listed there. One didn't have a bio, 2 did. I'm just curious.
Yeah, we believe they do. We have a lot of confidence in them. Our director has worked with them in the Culpeper area as well. So we have some experience with them in multiple areas. Regarding traffic circles, roundabouts, that is actually a VDOT trend and expectation now. VDOT is, signalized intersections are actually proving to be one of the more dangerous traffic management tools out there. It's where you get T-bones and fatalities. So traffic circles have become, or I hate to bring up the R-cut, but alternatives to traffic signals are what VDOT is pushing very much. In fact, VDOT is to the point, if you may recall at the Four Seasons Drive and Ryer Road, they actually took out an intersection because it didn't meet standards, and they weren't going to leave intersection or traffic lights in that don't meet standards any longer. So the consultant, probably it's less of a bias to them, but more of a recognition and being in tune with what VDOT will approve and accept. So that's my 2 cents and understanding of where we are with transportation planning.
Tom, you have a question?
Yeah, just a quick one. Do you have any idea what kind of bias the consultants were given as planning the type of traffic they were to emphasize? Will it be through traffic or the local traffic or residential? Was there any guidance given to them?
Well, they're evaluating existing traffic studies and looking at existing traffic data and projections. I don't know that there's a bias yet. We're early on in the process and there's going to be an input. What we want the corridor to do is to satisfy as much of all those missions as possible. Obviously, when you have 29,000 vehicle trips at the West End and 17,000 trips at the John Warner Parkway, there's a lot of through traffic that has to be accommodated. But I don't think we have given the consultant a bias, and Rachel can jump in too from this regard. Our goal is that we want this to be a multimodal corridor and a complete street. But there is that obvious amount of traffic, and that's what makes looking at this corridor important and kind of complicated. And we need to take time and get input and think through the options that can best serve both getting traffic in and out of the businesses there that need to survive and the residents that live there, and still convey traffic from Hollymead to downtown. It's probably jargony, but I don't think we've given them a bias. We want a corridor that can try to serve them all as best as possible.
Okay. Nancy? You're mute. Oh, there we go.
I did. I'm getting better at this. I have 2 points. One, I regularly, a couple of times a day even, go up Hillsdale left on Rio East to get to ACAC. And I can tell you that you can do anything you want there. But if there is no traffic enforcement, people will continue to try to make left turns from Rio going west on Hillsdale, and the light will change. And if you now have a green light, Hillsdale planning to make a left, you've got a car in front of you. And on a regular basis, there's car accident debris in that intersection because people are not driving properly. My second observation is, much to my astonishment, people coming north on Hillsdale, waiting at the light to make a left turn when there are people coming from north side, from Marty's neck of the woods. If they go straight across that intersection when the light turns green, they have the right of way. But the people on Hillsdale who are going north and want to make a left turn have decided they have the right of way. That is not something VDOT can engineer. While granted, a traffic circle would change the flow, you would still have people not caring because hurry or they're late, and I'm sorry that they're late, but it some pretty serious property damage. So that's an enforcement issue, and I hope that you will include enforcement. It's not inexpensive because it costs money, but it's a different pot of money than DOT's pot of money. And enforcement in this county does need to step up because that will save lives and property damage. My second observation is that there's been a lot of traffic work installation done by VDOT on Rio East. Crosswalks, turn lights, flashing yellow lights to make it, I mean, they've changed the whole signaling system for a good bit of area. And there is a median on the toughest part of it, which is closer to 29. What I'm concerned about when you leave out from John Warner to the city line, that is going to come in a big charge and you're going to miss the boat, and you're going to have something that if you take an action now, you might be able to deal with developers to get reasonable traffic considerations. But if you don't do it, and I don't know, Dan, I don't know if your background is in any transportation, but this is a huge planning issue. So I back 100%. Marty's a polite New Yorker. I'm not so polite. So you have it.
Well, those are good points. And you know, the studying the corridor is certainly the full corridor in an in-depth way is certainly the most desirable option. Again, given resources and timing and where we thought the money was best spent and time spent and served, it was in that other corridor. But real good points about that road and also Northfields. We have long-range recommendations that are major improvements that try to address Hillsdale Drive, if you're familiar with the small area plan. And I think the consultant is sort of looking at that and taking that into consideration and determining what sort of interim improvements might be useful, effective, or less effective because of an ultimate improvement that sort of realigns Hillsdale. That's one of the opportunities that bringing the consultant in can shed some light on how to stage these improvements. But enforcement is always a critical issue. There's no doubt about that. Whatever you do, it has to be well enforced.
Other questions?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I would say just two other observations. One is that on Rio, the part that I'm talking about, I think if I remember the numbers correctly, has about 12,000 trips a day on it. I mean, it's not the 20 some odd that you said on 29, I think you said on the Rio section that you're looking at, but it's got a healthy number of cars there. The second thing is I would ask, and the reason I sort of emphasizing the traffic a little bit, is there traffic flow is a funny thing right now, forgetting about COVID, about the pandemic. With the GPSs, you can't exactly predict where traffic is going to be flowing because the GPS is going to route you to the fastest route. Your car GPS is going to route you to your fastest route. In fact, I have an electrical engineering degree, and there's an article, if you would like, I can send you, that talks just about that. I mean, it's clear that what traffic planners are planning isn't always going to turn out, is not in fact going to turn out the way they think it's going to turn out. So I don't know how you've taken that into account, but I think you need to at least somehow have enough, when you do the study, don't do point estimates. You've got to do, something that includes plus or minus, so you can get a sense of what the impact is as you go forward.
I think those are good points. I wouldn't mind actually seeing the.
I'll get it for you.
And I think the best I can tell you regarding that, they're very good points. We'll relay that back to the consultant so that they're aware of that. If you're interested in traffic information, the map that I had actually had the traffic volumes.
We've got traffic maps from Wetzel.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm only interested, I'm not only interested, but I'm principally interested in the part of the narrow road. The last thing I would ask is, this came as a surprise to us. What we view as a change in scope. You may not view it that way, but I think a number of us did view it that way. I would ask that you try to keep us informed. I think this body has a great interest in what you're doing right now. And so if there's any changes, major changes, we'd like to know about that.
We'll certainly do that, and I'm certain Ned will do that, and Dan as well, as because they will also be informed. We'll keep them informed. Rachel is part of our team, so we'll keep you posted. And I can't speak for Ned. I can speak to what was available to us, and where we've focused in on allocating the resources. And I think, that's where we have to, as of right now, that's where we're working from, and what are the consultants working from.
Okay, and you are
We'll
forming.
definitely keep you informed if there's any changes.
Sure, I understand you're forming an advisory council as well. And we're gonna have one member from CAC, Tom, is going to be our member on the advisory council.
Yeah, that committee is very much kind of just sort of a technical feedback loop. It's not a steering committee that was appointed.
Good.
So Tom is going to be a good liaison for us. And so these types of communications, and we have questions and what ifs, and we need to a sounding board that can represent you on a quick notice. It's going to be Tom. There's a city rep, someone from the Planning District Commission and the MPO and VDOT will be on that as well. So we have some people to talk to and get feedback from, and welcome Tom on that group.
Okay, thank you.
For volunteering.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that concludes our item on the corridor study. David, thank you for putting up with us. We appreciate that. You have got a tough job ahead of you.
I appreciate it, and all the points are good and well taken, and I'll come back whenever you want me to keep you updated.
Okay,
Thanks.
I think that's it. Let me see. Our next item on our list is Rachel. Give us a quick Places 29 master plan overview. So as Rachel is gearing up, this is a continuation of the discussion we had last month, maybe, and I would like to encourage everybody to discuss.
Okay, is everyone able to see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, great. So as Marty said, we're continuing the conversation from last month where we're talking about land use in Places 29. And Marty asked me to touch on a couple of topics related to redevelopment and infill. So I want to touch on those first, and then we'll get to the map and open it up for your discussion and questions. So Marty asked me to talk about infill and redevelopment, and to do that, we have to take a look at our comprehensive plan and what that guiding document tells us about how growth should occur in Albemarle County. And the comp plan has a chapter, a full chapter dedicated to the growth management policy early on in the document, because it really guides much of the subsequent content of the comp plan. So our growth management goal is kind of twofold. It talks about our development areas and our rural areas. So the development areas are where development is supposed to occur. And the goal is that these are attractive, nice places, vibrant areas for development to happen. And then on the flip side of that, we have the rural areas, which are intended for preservation, preservation of resources and agriculture. And the county is development areas takes up about 5% of our land mass, and the remaining 95% are the rural areas. And so our growth management policy, again, it's those two pieces, and it goes into detail about, what are the elements that define the rural areas and that we should focus on and preserve within the rural areas. And then the development areas, we want these to be attractive places with high quality of design and growth, so that people want to live there, and so that they're nice places to live, so that we can preserve that 95% rural area. And then there's an objective within the growth management policy about how this policy should really guide land use decisions and investment in the county. So we want most of our infrastructure investment to occur in the development areas because that's where we expect most of the people will live. And then subsequent to that, we have a strategy about how new development should be guided to the development area, and that we shouldn't expect to see rezonings for big residential growth opportunities in the rural area. So then if you go further into the comprehensive plan, you get to chapter 8, and that talks about what should happen within the development areas, that 5% where we want our growth to occur. There's a broad goal. It's really similar to what we saw in that growth management plan, is that we want high quality growth within our development areas with attractive neighborhoods. We want business and industry, services and infrastructure to support those items. And so the topics that Marty asked me to touch on are really pertinent to this goal within the development area chapter. The first is a topic of redevelopment. And so the comprehensive plan acknowledges with only 5% of our land area dedicated to development area, we're going to have some different types of development occurring. You know, when the comp plan was adopted in 2015, only 11% of that 5% was vacant land. So the majority of the development area has already been built out. And so we expect that there will be redevelopment occurring to accommodate the growth that we expect in our community. So redevelopment is one concept that we expect to see, and that's redevelopment is essentially development of already developed land. The comp plan talks about how it's important to promote redevelopments because it's efficient. Development sites that have already been developed already have infrastructure needed to support development. That's not to say that more or additional infrastructure might not be needed with redevelopment, but the majority of it is there, and redevelopment really helps us keep our development areas to that 5%. And so there's a strategy within the development area chapters about promoting redevelopment as a way to take advantage of that existing investment that's already occurred in the infrastructure. The next topic is that of infill. And so infill is development that occurs on vacant property, but it's within a larger already developed portion of our development areas. And so infill is, some of you may recall conversations we've had around infill with previous developments in the Rio area. There's no formal definition of infill. A lot of the reason is because it's difficult to define, and it's really based on context. You can't have, it'd be really difficult to have, 5 or 6 criteria about size or street frontage or something, because every site is different. And so it's really based on context. So the comp plan talks about infill occurring on vacant parcels, but those vacant parcels are surrounded or mostly surrounded by existing development, typically within neighborhoods or along a street where a development pattern is already well set. And so the comp plan does have recommendations around how infill should be considered when development is happening on infill sites. And it recommends that developers build within the density range that's recommended in the land use, but that it be done in a context sensitive way. So that would mean, think about scale. You wouldn't want a really high density development on a street that was all single family development. And so that's what that kind of strategy talks about around infill. Another objective related to both redevelopment and infill is the compatibility piece that I just talked about. Again, these are expected to happen in the development area. They're encouraged to happen because of that 11% vacant land. And that was in 2015. I don't know the percentage now, but I'm guessing it's less than 11. We're probably down in the single digits now. And that's work we'll do when we are working on the comp plan update here soon, that we'll go and do that number, run that number again and do that analysis. And so the last topic is greenfields. This is related, but I know Marty didn't ask me to talk about this, but it's kind of related to the other two, so I'll just throw it in there. So greenfields is, it talks about those large kind of vacant properties Again, no formal definition, but the comp plan has some guidance about it and some description of what a greenfield is. It says it's a multi-acre site, not closely surrounded by existing development, can range in size from a couple acres to several hundred. Again, context is important. You have to take a look at kind of what's around it, what's along the street, how is the street pattern surrounding it. And the comp plan for greenfield sites recommends densities as at the high end of the density range for these developments, just because really trying to make good efficient use of that 5% development area to try and to target the growth in the development areas. And here's that strategy. It's strategy 5B within the development area chapters about that high end of the density range. So that was a little bit of context. Now I'll just show the map for Places 29 development area. If you recall, last month we talked about what each of these categories meant. And to orient you on this map, so this is the southern portion of the Places 29 development area. And I'll just flip real quick. This is the northern portion. So the map is oriented with north to the right side of the screen. So here's 29 cutting through it. And here is John Warner Parkway along here. And Rio Road is here, running up to 29. This is our small area plan area. So if you can see a good chunk of the land in the Rio CAC area, especially that north of Rio, is the yellow color, which is neighborhood density residential. So a lot of the single family residential neighborhoods. South of Rio Road and closer to the city, we have some more of the orange color, which is urban density residential. And then up closer to 29, there's some more of the orange. And then of course, the Rio 29 small area has a different land use category that's not on this map that we covered last time. And here's the northern map. Again, you probably want to focus your discussion on the southern portion, but I'll just show this. Again, just a mix of different categories. There's more industrial up here. The purple is industrial, and this is our airport here. So a lot of the industrial land use is kind of concentrated up around that. And the North Fork Research Park is here in the other purple. And then the last thing I'll show is, this may look familiar to some of you who've been on the CAC for a little while. 2 years ago in 2019, we did our capacity analysis and our growth management report. This is something that we'll do again here this year. We do it every other year. We'll do it when we're gearing up for our comp plan update to help inform that process. But it might be a little too small for you to read on your screen, but if you can go on our website and find it, or just Google Albemarle County Growth Management Report if you want to take a look at it again. But here's your area. And these maps, these circles on the maps show the undeveloped sites within the Rio CAC area. And the different colors, orange means single family. And this is based on the comp plan designation, this box here. Single family, and this would be multifamily. And blue is those that are already approved. So the larger the bubble, the larger the number of units. Where my cursor is, this was Parkway Place. So that's potential multifamily residential. Closer to the city, there are a couple of vacant sites. Behind Belvedere and Dunlora, there are a couple of vacant sites that could be single family. And then closer to 29, you have some more of that pink, which is multifamily, potential multifamily. This is right next to Arden Place, if you're familiar with that green field behind Albemarle Square. So I have the categories. If you have questions on what the color means, I can bring that up, but that concludes my slides, and I'm going to stop sharing. So turn it over to Marty for you all to have a discussion, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
So I had sort of two thoughts. The first was that the area we're in, the reason I asked for redevelopment is because I think that, you can see that most of the area for the Rio area has already been developed. I think the biggest outstanding property, I may be saying that wrong, hasn't been developed is the Wetzel property. So I think we need to think about what the land use designations will mean in the future. how they should be applied when people come forward. I live in Washington in a community. We could see people tearing down single-family homes and building McMansions. I'm sure Nancy's seen that as well. And we don't want to get into that situation where we have a couple of single-family homes or community of single-family homes and having big apartment houses next to it. I don't think that's what the community would want. So we need to think about what will be the guidelines in the future for the land use designations and redevelopment. And I think the other thing that struck me is for the existing where we are right now today, I don't exactly understand what the rationale was for picking, and that's what we're going to ask Rachel, maybe to elaborate a little bit more, for picking a certain land use designation. So let's take the Wetzel property, for example. Everything is yellow except for the schools around it. Why is that? How did that end up being an urban mixed use property as a designation today? Is there a rationale for it? Is it documented? How does that work?
So the way our master plans work is it's a pretty significant community engagement process, and it was done in 2010 before I was at the county. So I can't speak to the rationale for that particular parcel, but it was vetted through the community and it went through the process we go through for all comp plan amendments or all master plans to get the community input, bring it to the planning commission, bring it to the board of supervisors for approval. My guess is that that site where it's located close to the city across from KTEC, they have a small little neighborhood serving center identified there. That was kind of the rationale, was that its location on important transportation networks and location next to the school would make it a good opportunity for that density and for people to be able to hopefully take transit with some concentration of density in that area. That's just speculation. I wasn't there at the time, so I'm not.
Okay, so let's stop there. How would we think about in the future for the land use designations? You said that there's a potential to take the current land use designation and break it in apart because the range is too wide. Is that right? Just to remind everybody.
That's correct. We're actually,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we're looking at that with the Crozet master plan right now. And we're proposing a new land use category called middle density residential that's between the neighborhood density and the urban density. So we're looking at a range of somewhere from 6 to 12 to 18. We haven't worked out the kinks yet on that, but we're looking at adding that with Crozet, and for subsequent master plan updates, we could apply that to other areas as well.
I've dominated this, but I'm going to ask one other question. What's the definition of density? Since I've learned there are two definitions for density, net and gross. What are you using in the plan?
That's a great question. So density is dwelling units per acre. And we have a zoning ordinance that looks at a gross calculation. So we look at an entire site. So you have a 5-acre parcel. Let's do 10 because that math is easier. So you have a 10-acre parcel and 5 acres of it has streams and slopes that you can't touch. The zoning ordinance doesn't care. You can still get whatever density per that 10 acres. So if it's R1, you can get 10 units on it. The comp plan does a net calculation. So if you wanted to rezone that property and go through our legislative review process, when we are calculating density on that site, we would subtract out the 5 acres that have floodplain, stream, and slopes that are not developable, and just calculate density based on the 5 acres.
Oh, okay. Oh, I just learned that. Thank you. It's very interesting.
You're welcome.
Okay. Who has questions? You're all flabbergasted?
Well,
And then
I guess I would offer that that you have a need for affordable housing. So you have to expect that in the development area, a lot of the new development is going to be high density because high density is less expensive per unit than low density and therefore is more affordable. So if you build out all your 5% development area with single family houses, you're going to run out of place to put sufficient housing for future growth. So that's why greenfield areas are typically going to be high density. So that's the rationale that you were looking for.
Mhm. I saw somebody else's hand up. Nicole, I'll come back. I want to ask you. Nicole, you want to say something?
Well, Marty, can you help me understand? I know we've had this conversation before. Where is the Rio 29? Where are we in the schedule for master plan updates? I think the Southern and Western is going to do a master plan update before us, maybe. I'm just curious, what were you thinking with the conversation? Are we due for a master plan update next, or is that kind of further away?
My understanding, Rachel, you certainly can jump in if you. My understanding is that the county planning is going to first look at the comp plan and make some change and update that, and then we were next, which would mean 2 years from now, is the way I sort of sense it. Rachel, you want to add, please?
Yeah, that's correct. So our comp plan actually recommends that master plans be updated every 5 years. And, Places 29 is 11 years old now. So we're thinking that's next on the list, but the board makes the decision on which plan we do next. They may see another master plan as a higher priority just because they think growth is happening quicker there. We haven't had that conversation with the board yet. Our next project is the comp plan update. And we meet with the board annually to kind of look at our work program. So that conversation will happen in a year or two for them to kind of tell us which one would be next.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to go back to Lee for a second. Lee, one of the things that struck me, when we heard this even earlier today when David was talking, that there's an assumption that the resources are there to support whatever the zoning decision is made. And particularly when you get to affordable housing, that really requires a reasonable level of resources in existence. Can't build the affordable housing and then 5 years from now figure you're going to add the resources, because then you end up with a mess, I think, from my perspective at least. And so the county actually said, I think the comp plan, if I don't remember the words exactly, sort of presupposes you have the resources in place before you do, sort of, you go away from the zoning, maybe drastically is the way I would say it, unartfully. And I don't think that the county always follows that procedure. Rachel, maybe you want to comment? I'm putting you on the spot. I don't mean to, but go ahead.
Yeah, I think you're right. The comp plan says a lot of things. It says we want high density in the development area, but also says that should be supported by sufficient infrastructure and services. And I think it's difficult to keep up with growth. Those are board level decisions, and there's a lot of implications that go into a decision like funding infrastructure. Taxes have to be raised if we want to pay for all these things in all of our development areas. And so there are trade-offs, and it's a tough spot for the board to try and figure out how to do that. But this Rio corridor plan hopefully will get the Rio area in a place to kind of understand what especially transportation infrastructure is needed to help support the growth that's happening on the corridor. We are a little bit behind in our planning for the corridor. So we're hopeful that this will help further the efforts. And we got a great round of funding from VDOT with Smart Scale. We hope we can continue to do that and support, the transportation network that's really needed for this area.
Yeah, what's interesting to me is that the building that's taking place is on the part that they're not studying in the corridor area. So you have Laughlin, we just had the lofts, so that's where the building is going up. We have Eco Village is on the books. So there's a number of buildings on that side of the area and not being addressed and you heard David give us a long list of things that were considered and unfunded. So it is hard for the board, but I don't think they get the full picture. And I don't think planning gives them a full picture, frankly, just to be frank about it. I mean, Tom?
I'm just curious, is there any plans to study where additional area might come from for adding to the development area? I mean, once we run out of once the 5% is full, which might happen in the next 10 years or so, are there any plans to expand that area and where that might happen? Or maybe there's something I could look at on the website just to check?
Not currently, but we are getting ready to start a comprehensive plan update, and that would be the opportunity to look at that policy and to see, should we still hold the development boundary where it is, or should we look at changing that and expanding it? And so what we'll do is, we do this every 2 years. We look at the capacity of our development area. We'll do that again. We'll do the analysis of, what's our how much vacant land we have, how much growth we think we can accommodate in the development area. And we like to make sure we can accommodate 20 years of growth. And the last time we did it in 2019, we were right at that level of 20 years, pushing up on the development area, might need to be expanded. Now there's a redevelopment factor too. Redevelopment could start happening and we could get more density in lower density areas. Those are all things that we'll have to look at when we do our comprehensive plan update.
Okay. Nancy?
And for sure, when you do that redevelopment area in the 5%, you got to look at all the empty parking lots. You've got to look at Belk has filed Chapter 11. Penny, forget it, Sears gone. And things aren't much better in a lot of the small strips either. If you go down, what I have discovered, it's across from Walmart where Reds used to be. There's huge vacant properties on both sides of the gas station. And that's partly, but it started, and we used to have conversations with our prior planning commissioner liaison about retail and retail physical investments versus retail a la Amazon and I suppose Walmart. So there's a huge factor there, and it may be a long time before we reabsorb the empty retail space that the combination of Amazon and pandemic have given us.
Yeah, that's a great point, and something I think we need to figure out how to project. With the Rio 29 small area plan, we're starting to plan for how these areas might redevelop. But to figure out how to put a number to how many residential units might go into a redevelopment is tricky. A lot of assumptions go into it, but yeah, that's a great point.
Okay, so that leads me right into Dan. Dan Bailey, you want to?
Marty, I think that Dan Bailey had his.
That's how I'm going to it.
Oh, sorry.
So Dan, I'm going to give you the floor, and you can talk about the planning commission. Go ahead.
Thanks, I appreciate it. I actually, just building on what you just said, Nancy, it's actually in the pandemic expanding beyond retail. I think if you drive up and you look at the office space, there's more for sale and for lease signs in the office space just across from the putt-putt. We are in a unprecedented time that is shifting the economics, and it is making it hard to forecast and plan what the future is going to look like. that being said, I was asked to, kind of give the update. I am pleased to present that it did pass the planning commission. A lot of it can give Rachel and team a lot of congratulations around the form-based code and the optional overlay. The first version, it's by no means probably done. She has a laundry list of work, to be done, and we're in a work plan laid out from understanding the street network planning, the civic space design guidelines, green buildings, transit planning. So there's a number of things still to be worked out with the form-based code, but that it will be going in front of the Board of Supervisors to be inserted as a zoning text amendment, a zoning map amendment, to make an option for developers to kind of opt into, and that kind of starts to talk about, like, gives us some flexibility on redevelopment. Hopefully gives them some flexibility of redevelopment for us to adapt and adjust to this changing environment, and to redevelop, to your point, some of those parking lots that are prevalent in that area, that take up a lot of area, a lot of space. I think there was a lot of, and Marty asked me to speak on this. I think some of you might have listened in on it. There was a lot of discussion around incentives, and also around the county's role in trying to further the form-based code. I think there's a lot of work for us to be done there. There was an interesting comment I'd love to get your all's thought on, that was raised by a fellow planning commissioner, of why was the height restricted at 6? I think it's 6 stories with an additional story for affordable housing. And if we're talking about growth area, and are we going to expand it or create more density, should this area, particularly given its, being in the urban ring and a high area, should it be considered to allow for higher density and height and stories? It made me think a lot about it. I've been actually reflecting on it for the last 2 weeks since the meeting. So I'll just pause there and open up for any questions or comments related to the committee's thoughts on the form-based code.
Nancy? Unmute yourself.
Yep, I'm doing it. I just had cataract surgery and my eyes are not quite what they should be, but at least the patch off. That was gross. I mean, Rachel can give you more chapter and verse than I can, but the communities, there was a lot of community sessions, a lot of discussion about height and what was the right height. And curiously enough, if I recall correctly, Rachel, there were developers who sort of thought 6 was right, because you'd have, in the core, you'd have maybe a floor or 2 of retail or office or whatever, and you could build on top of that. And it had to do somewhat with construction methods. And I think that 7 or 8, well, maybe 7 if you're doing affordable housing, but 8, you may as well then talk about 10 to 15. And there was no way community was going to go for 10 to 15. And I think that you would find, I would guess, that the traffic congestion would also be a problem. And it would be quite a radical change.
I'm trying to think what the hospitals are. I think I was trying to picture them. I don't think anything is more than 6 stories high, I think, in the whole area. I may be wrong.
Maybe not in the county. They're in the city. You're seeing an influx of the number of buildings greater than 6. You have the code building. You have the Apex Green building is, I think it's 6 on top of a 3 or 4 parking structure parking. Kind of sits down. I'm not exactly remembering what it is. And then the new building that and I forget the name of what it's called, but went in on the back half of the glass building, and the tree house is greater than 6 up into the parking lot. So, and it's now taller than the parking garage that was next to it that was 6 stories. So you're not seeing it necessarily in the county, but you're definitely seeing a prevalence of structures bigger than 6 in the city. So yeah, no, it's an interesting. I think that I'm not disagreeing at all. I just had to reflect on it, as I think it, you know, a fellow planning commissioner from Crozet was kind of challenging. And as we start to think about, like, what does it mean to expand their development area versus redevelop, I think there's going to be, that question's going to come up a lot about increased height in certain areas versus increasing a footprint into the rural area.
I wonder if there's a fire trucks. I mean, when you reach above 6 feet, there may be different investment in terms of firefighting equipment. Something to think about as well. We just lost.
Just to elaborate on that point, as Dan mentioned, construction methods. Once you can stick built with wood up to about 6 stories. After that, you have to go to steel and concrete. So there's a kind of quantum jump in the construction cost, and in order to make that jump feasible, it doesn't pay to just go to 7. You want to go to 10 or 12 or 50, like you have in New York City. So it just depends on what the land is worth, and that depends on how scarce it becomes. So at some point, you either start tearing down single-family dwellings and putting in apartments, or you concentrate the development in one space. And it actually is conducive to reducing traffic, because if people live where they work, then they don't have to get on the highway to get there. So the form-based code encourages that kind of mixed-use development where you have your retail and your residential all in the same place, so people can live where they work.
Yeah, I think I'm excited, you know, to get going on the form-based code. It will be interesting to see which developer will take a jump and opt into it, and if we have the right incentives and everything in place to get there, because it would be. I'm a big fan of it, and I think it would really create a neighborhood and a character to the space. I don't want to, you know, how many years do we see the car lots that are now coming back on this side from Pantops that go back to Pantops and then back to this side? So it'd be nice to create more character in that space. Look forward to getting your all's opinion and seeing how we can make it happen. The last thing, as you think about it and reach out to Ned, I know there'll be a lot of discussions, just how the civic spaces, I think, is going to be the next work on the work plan, and how and the transit planning are going to be the next bit on the work plan for Rachel. So there'll be a lot of input and understanding there around the form-based code.
Okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong on that, Rachel. I think I got all that right.
That's correct. Those items were high priority, kind of next work. I will say that that's going to be up to the board to kind of direct us. They set our work program, and especially with my team, the long range planning team, of what projects we take on next. So that'll be their call, but those were listed as high priority items based on community feedback and planning commission discussion.
Okay. So we only have one other. Thank you, Dan. We only have one other. Judy.
Yeah, a couple of questions. Number one, I think that I've got David Benish beat that we've been here 43 years. So, and to go back on what people said about fire equipment, seems to me that I recall that the buildings were not supposed to be any higher than, I think it's like 5, 6 stories, because we didn't have the fire equipment to accommodate in case there was a fire. So having said that, but I have a question to anybody from staff. we've got a relative who's up in New York, who's a real estate lawyer, and she is being slammed because people are moving out of apartments and they want to get into single family homes. When you drive up 29, we are becoming a mini Northern Virginia. Apartments, concrete, parking lots. Has anybody thought about, rather than, redoing the comp plan, the master plan, this plan and that plan, taking a step back and evaluating? The pandemic has thrown us a curveball. Where people are not probably going to be going into the office. There's going to be a lot of virtual meetings, and maybe we need to take a step back, breathe, evaluate before we do a hodgepodge of this, that, and the other thing, and then just saying, oh, maybe we made a mistake. So just a thought about, it always doesn't have to be done now. Take a step back and breathe, look at it, look at the big picture. So my 2 cents.
Thank you. Okay, Rachel, are there any other things that we need to be aware of from your perspective, or warn you out?
I'll just 2 quick things. The form-based code is going to the board March 17th. It'll be their evening meeting. It's a public hearing. So it'll be after 6 p.m. I don't know when it will be on the agenda, but you can keep an eye for that. And then the sidewalk project that was mentioned, Marty, you'd asked for an update. I'll just share that it did go back out to bid. And I think the close date for this round of RFP or proposals will be March 4th. So hopefully we'll get someone to want to build our sidewalks, but I'll keep you posted on how that progresses.
And that went out, I don't know if you know the answer to that. That went out as all 3 projects bundled together then.
It did. Mhm.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you. Okay, then for you, and then I think we can close the meeting.
And Nancy have a question?
Oh, I'm sorry, Nancy.
It's a 2 cents to pile on to what Judy said. I was watching the news and I was astounded to see a printed home, actually a 3-bedroom, and it was printed with concrete. So strips of concrete, which create a very interesting, but the price of building this house was so much lower, and it was single family, but if you can program the printer, those of you who are tech people, I assume you could build anything. This was a 1-story, but I assume you can figure out how to do more. It was quite impressive. So there's more to look at than, Nicole, you're smiling. Did you see the same report?
Oh yeah, I did. It's really, really cool. Yeah, there's a lot of cool things happening in the building world. I wish we were able to legally build a lot of these things.
Okay, so just to reiterate on the watch list, Rachel, I had sent the 3 items on the watch list that we had mentioned last time to Ned. He responded he would look into them. I would be anxious to hear if he's had any progress. I can tell you that I passed the Chick-fil-A and there's still lines going out to 29, onto 29. So that hasn't been taken care of. Unfortunately, I still see homeless standing around Allen and Allen. And depending on the day, sometimes I see trash, sometimes I don't see trash. I don't know, Brian, I don't know if you have a good enough view to see it. Nancy?
So I did what you asked. I took pictures. Brian, I'm sorry, for some reason, I don't have your email address in my address book, but Audrey isn't here. I did send it to her and I send it to Marty, both the pictures. And someone had tried to break into the building from the side. because you could see the jimmied lock with, where someone had actually probably taken some crowbar or something. The police person sent me an email, which I again forwarded to those people whose emails I had, and Ned did talk to them. Of course, it snowed, so tell if the trash had been picked up. And apparently Rachel, the police were going to check as to who owned the property and what the zoning issues were, because apparently that's where the car wash was potentially going to go in. Oh, Dan, look at you. Cool message.
Right.
So,
Allen and Allen was a proposed car wash. I'm not sure the status of that, but I could follow up on it for you.
Yeah.
but there is trash accumulating there, more so in the back there. It's horrible. And I don't know if anybody's living in the shed, Brian, but they're certainly messing in the shed.
Yeah, so I think we have to bring that back. I will take the action and bring it back to Dan's attention. Or again, I'll write him a note, copy you, Rachel, just to remind him. Tell him we missed him. Anything else? Any other specific watch list items? Okay. So I think I will declare this meeting closed. Thank you all for attending. I hope you found it interesting and look forward to seeing you in a month from now. Dan, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Marty.
Thank you.